to PCU. In this lesson, I'd like to share with you a classic game played by two players who were the best of their era, Winauer and Anderssen, from 1878, a real long time ago. I'm just going to brush through the opening moves, but we'll talk in detail about the middle game and the end game part of the game. It started out as a Sicilian defense, and White chose the closed Sicilian variation. White more often would play today knight f3 followed by d4. But this is certainly not a bad idea, and I think it's underestimated. It has more danger to it for Black than most people think. If you recall, Boris Spassky, who was world champion in the late 1960s, early 70s, and lost his title only to Bobby Fischer, he won countless very beautiful and instructive games with this opening. So in case you're interested for a way to avoid all those long and complicated Sicilian variations, this may be something for you to look up. So those are the games played by Boris Spassky in the 60s. Black here can choose from two different setups, and today most experienced players or masters would choose to develop their bishop from f8 to g7 by playing g6. Even if not right away, first they would play knight c6, and then after White plays g3 or practically almost any other move, then they would respond with g6 and bishop g7 and so on. But of course this is today, or at least the 20th century, but now in our game we are talking about the 19th century, where Black responded by playing e6. Now don't misunderstand me, this is not a move that would never be played today. Even by grandmasters, some choose to develop the bishop the other way and play e6, so it's certainly a playable move. And White played g3. So now Black has the opportunity to play d5 immediately and to occupy the center with that pawn. And that has been tried, and usually White would exchange those pawns and then continue with developing the bishop to g2. But let's not get much into that opening element of the game. Black played knight c6, developing for now, and White continued with bishop g2. So now Black no longer has that opportunity for now to play d5, but needs to continue to develop and played knight f6. One important thing to point out is that it was crucial for Black to develop the queen knight first, because if Black would have developed the knight to f6 immediately with the other knight still being back on b8, then White would have the opportunity to play e5 and chase the knight back. So it was important to first have the knight out to prevent the White pawn advancing to e5. And White continued by playing d3, and Black responded by playing d6, and came knight to f3, developing. It would certainly be something to consider for White instead to play f4 first, and only after to play knight f3. Bishop e7. And now White played an interesting move. I personally would, I think, just castle here as White, but White played bishop f4, perhaps with the idea to play e5 next. Well, I would say by no means is Black forced to play e5 right now, but he did, and White responded with bishop g5. Black developed with bishop e6, perhaps trying to prepare to play d5, and White played knight d2. Now that we can see the Black pawn advancing from e6 to e5 a couple of moves ago, we can notice that Black has created a weakness, a hole for himself on d5. we typically consider a potential weak square one that can never ever be protected by one of your own pawns again. In the contrary, the white pawn, on the other hand, can. So the white e4 pawn is controlling that square, and black can only control it with pieces, not with pawns. So generally what white would try to do in a situation like this, to regroup his knight from d2 to f1 and then to e3, and then eventually to occupy that square, preferably with a knight. At this point, white allowed an interesting combination that black can try, to play knight e4. The idea of this move would be that regardless how white recaptures on e4, then black would capture the bishop on g5 and win a pawn. However, the important pattern is that you need to calculate also what would happen if white makes the intermediate move of bishop takes bishop on e7. Now, if black recaptures on e7, then white, after capturing the knight on e4, would be a piece ahead. So black must follow the road and make another intermediate move, giving up on his own queen, however, attacking the white queen on d1. Here again, if pawn takes knight on c3, queen takes bishop, and black is a pawn ahead. Make sure you always keep the count who is ahead, so you know how to evaluate the variation. Of course, white can capture the queen, but then so will black. Knight captures queen on d1, and yet one more time, if white captures the knight, black captures the bishop and maintains his extra pawn. So white's best option right now is to play bishop to c7, and when knight captures on b2, then white will capture the pawn immediately on d6, or rather capture first on c6 to ruin black's pawn structure, and then only to capture on d6 with a double attack, attacking the pawns on c5 and e5. So one of those pawns will certainly be lost, and black certainly did not achieve anything. Okay, but let's go back to our game. Here we go. And after knight d2, black's choice was to play a6, most likely trying to play b5, which white prevented with a typical method of just playing a4, and black played rook to c8, and white played b3, probably to prevent any hope for black to play c4. And this was the key moment of the game. Here again, black has the opportunity to go for a similar combination that we've discussed a minute ago. Can you think of the difference why this may work better now for black? Well, it is because the white bishop can no longer go to c7 in that same variation that we investigated. So, what do I mean? Black plays knight e4, and this is a serious decision, obviously, because it puts a knight into an attack of various white pieces. So I suggest you even put the piece back and try to calculate without moving the pieces and come to a conclusion whether was it a good choice or maybe not so. Okay, so hopefully you made your calculation, and I would suggest at least to spend 5 to 10 minutes because this is a complicated, complex question. So the answer to that question was it was not a good idea particularly to go for it. Black certainly does not win a pawn, although shouldn't lose either if they would have continued correctly. Again, white's only chance is to make the intermediate move. Now knight captures, bishop captures, and knight captures. So far everything is similar to the previous variation. And another difference that we can notice is that if the white bishop at some point plans to take on c6, now black has an additional option to capture back with the rook. On the other hand, the pawn on b2 is gone, so black cannot escape with his knight by capturing there. And now, if white wants to hope for any advantage, he must move the bishop, and he did move back to g5. And here, the most logical move is to move the knight back to c3, and that is exactly what black did in the game. As it turned out, that was a significant mistake that gave white the advantage. The only move that will give black hope for equalizing the game is to make yet another intermediate move by attacking white's bishop. The good news for black right now is that if the bishop retreats to e3, the knight will be ready to escape by capturing that bishop, maintaining the extra pawn that black got. If the bishop moves to h4, black would play g5, trapping that bishop. However, white has yet another intermediate move by playing knight e4. Now, if black captures the bishop on g5, then white would be ready to capture on d6 with a fork, and then capturing the rook. And then, if at the end of that variation black captures the white knight, then white finally captures the black knight, having an extra exchange. The black knight cannot escape either, and if black would choose to play knight f2, the king would capture back, and after pawn takes bishop on g5, again knight d6 check, fork, winning the rook on c8. So the best option and only reasonable option for black right now is to protect that pawn on d6 and play king d7. The good news now is for white that the bishop has a retreat square on d2, while the black knight still has challenges to get out. The only free square that it could move to right now is b2. However, the knight is not going anywhere from there, so all white needs to do is to attack the knight again, for example with the bishop on c3, and then the knight would be gone. However, black has another intermediate move that saves the game by playing f5. And now, sadly for white, the white knight is kind of trapped. And it can only go to c3, where it would be traded off, and black would maintain his advantage and his extra pawn. So therefore, white must give up the knight for a pawn, and then capture the knight on d1. Now in this position, white has two bishops, which certainly is a good thing. On the other hand, black has some space advantage in the center, and those probably balance each other out. A very fascinating and interesting variation, requiring a whole bunch of good moves to be made on both sides, not to stay behind. And now let's get back to the actual game and see why playing knight c3 and not h6 on move 14 was a mistake. After knight c3, what should white play? And this is another critical moment, and unless you foresaw all of this and the upcoming several moves, you may evaluate this position as end of story, black is a pawn up, let's go for it. And probably that's what happened in the game when Anderssen, who was one of the top players of the world at the time, misevaluated this position, thinking that he simply up a pawn, and white overlooked this combination. White continued with playing knight c4, and all of a sudden it will be clear that it is black who is in trouble. The pawn on d6 is hanging, and black does not have a direct way to defend it, because after king d7, the black king would step into another fork, followed by knight b6. And of course the rook cannot go to d8, and there is no other way to protect the pawn. Therefore, black was left with trading the bishop for the knight. And now the problem is that the black knight on c3 again will be in a serious situation. How should white capture back? Both look reasonable, but one is clearly better than the other. Again, I suggest you take some time and try to come to your own conclusion. And the correct answer is capturing with the d pawn is a mistake, because then black gets to play f5 and then rescue the knight via the e4 square. If right now white would try to play f3 and take under control the e4 square, the drawback of that is that it also blocks off the white's bishop diagonal on g2, and black would be now free to play d5, and then if needed protect the knight by playing d4. Let's go back again and continue with the game where white chose the correct move by capturing back with the b3 pawn to c4. Let's see now a couple of choices that black had in an attempt to rescue the knight. One would be to play b5, and then if everything gets traded, the knight gets rescued, or otherwise if the knight gets attacked, the pawn could advance to b4. However, this fails because white would trade the pawns, and now not immediately trading on b5, but first simply trading on c6, and now black is in serious trouble because of the upcoming skewer on the 8th rank. Let's go back. So after b captured back on c4, black has a couple other attempts. For example, playing knight b4 and attacking on c2. Now white could just play king d2 and trap the knight. After h6, intermediate move, the bishop wouldn't go to h4 where it can get trapped, but would retreat to e3, and now black can try to play d5 to then protect the knight by playing d4. Of course, white is ready to capture. Check, forking, winning the piece back. Pawn captures, pawn captures. Now the pawn on b7 is hanging, so black has to do something about it. And if black would advance the pawn, the problem is that white could target that pawn real quickly by playing either immediately rook h to b1, or first playing c3, chasing the knight back, and then attack the pawn, and black would be unable to protect it without losing material. Okay, so let's continue with the line. If black protects the pawn with the rook c7, then also white would continue by chasing the knight back and putting quickly pressure on that b pawn, playing rook b1 followed by rook b6 and doubling up the rooks, and black will have a difficult situation. Okay, here we are, back to the game. Black, instead of either of those choices, played d5, giving a pawn up, but looking for some rescue for the knight. White indeed captured, and came knight b4. Now black threatens to capture on c2 and fork, as well as the pawn on d5. If the white king would move to d2 like in the previous variation to protect on c2 and attack the knight on c3 at the same time, black with the knight from b4 would capture the pawn on d5 and would maintain the extra pawn. White played d6 instead, although even after king d2 and knight d5, white would be better clearly after playing rook a3. The knight would be in trouble. Let me show you a few more moves of how the game continued. White played d6, going for a very interesting combination. Now, if black accepts that, knight c2, then king d2, knight a1, and now we do not capture the knight on a1, but the other knight, because the knight from the corner doesn't go anywhere. White would have a significant advantage here. Therefore, black chose the better f6 intermediate move, attacking the bishop. Bishop retreated. Knight c2 would result similar as the last variation. The game continued with knight retreating c3 to d5, maintaining the threat on the c2 pawn. This is one of those situations when the d6 pawn can become a monster or it can become a weakness. So that's what the game is about right now. Came king d2 with a threat to play c3 and disconnect the two knights, so white could just capture then the one on d5. Black captured on e3, pawn captured back. Black's problem is that he keeps being busy guarding against various threats like the b7 pawn or one of the knights getting trapped. Black played rook b8, white followed with bishop h3. A fine move preventing the black king from attacking the pawn. And if black would play rook to d8 to attack the pawn, white could advance the pawn to a protected square. Game continued with king f7, came rook hb1, very good move, rook hd8 attacking the pawn, and c3, chasing the knight back, and now rook b6. And now black's best option would have been to play rook captures pawn, and then rook b1, rook d8, doubling up, rook captures the pawn, king g6. But white would also maintain the advantage here by playing rook c7, threatening to double up on the 7th rank, rook d3 check, and white would sacrifice yet another pawn, because that would result in now black having two pieces hanging, the knight and the rook. So black would lose one of them. So white has the advantage here anyway. Instead, the game continued with black playing c4 here, where, very importantly, white does not capture the pawn, but played rook b1, putting pressure on the b7 pawn. Rook d6, rook b7 check, exchange of rooks, and now white can save the day by playing d4, keeping white in a clearly better endgame because black has all kind of weaknesses in these pawns. Let me just quickly show the very end of the game. Black responded with knight a5, rook b8, h5, which is a further weakening to the position, bishop f1, rook c6, bishop g2, rook d6, bishop f3. Now the h5 pawn is the next in trouble. Rook h8, king f6, bishop captured, g6, bishop retreat, rook b6, king c2, rook d6, king d1, rook b6, rook c8. And now not only that, the pawn is in trouble, even the e5 pawn and the knight are attacked. And finally black resigned because too many pawns will be lost. A very well played game by Wiener, and a very interesting pattern because this knight e4 combination that we saw happen right here after white played b3 with knight e4, it's something very typical and happens in many similar positions. So hopefully this will be helpful in a similar situation when it may come up in one of your games. And finally, let's see the jewel of the week. This is an absolutely brilliant position where white amazingly can win. I suggest you take your time and figure out how to do it. And here is the answer. Rook c3 check. If the king moves to the 5th rank, rook c5 and the queen is lost. King d4. Now rook d3. The rook cannot be captured because knight f4 forks. King went back to c4, and now comes the key move. Absolutely amazing. Rook d5. If either the queen or the king captures, fork follows, and after queen h3 or any other move, knight e3 almost puts the black king in checkmate. Black can only escape by giving the queen up for the knight, but that of course leads to a losing endgame. Thank you for listening, and so long until next time.